Hi, Dr. Cubitt.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
Good. It's good to be here. And hi, everyone who is here joining us on our Horse Nutrition Facebook Live Q&A. It's good to have you guys here this evening. We are going to be talking about properly storing hay and how to prepare for winter on tonight's Facebook Live. I think it's a really great topic to talk about this time of year. And so it'll be really good to hear all of your guys' questions about that topic. Um, if you guys could let us know in the comments, I mean, I think if you've been on before, you kind of know the drill, but let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to be able to hear if you guys are across the country, maybe in other countries. That could be very interesting. Could be a totally different time of day for them, but oh, and Kylie is asking initially, will this information apply for donkeys or other animals as well? I think this could actually, except for some of the horse math that we're going to talk about specifically to horses, knowing how to store hay, this is going to be a great topic for anybody who has livestock. So, oh, look, we have some coming in from Illinois, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Washington, Montana. Do we have, let's see. Oh, we have Illinois as Midwest. I was wondering if we had some other Midwesterners coming in. It's so good to have you guys on here with us tonight. So, right before we kind of get started, we are going to be giving away some free Standlee product coupons. So, first off, if you guys would go share this Facebook Live right now to your Facebook page, make sure it's public so we can see that you shared it. Share the Facebook Live, and you could have a chance to be one of the winners of the or of the Standlee free product coupons. We're gonna have a short survey at the end too. And if you complete that, you'll also be entered to win. And then we're going to be giving some away at the end just for you guys being here and being present and hanging out with us this evening. So there's a lot of opportunities to win some Standlee free product coupons. So go share it right now on your Facebook page if you have not yet. And for those of you who are joining us right now, have you guys listened to the Beyond the Barn podcast yet? Dr. Cubitt and I co-host that podcast. Most of it is talking about horse nutrition. We have some other fun little interviews peppered in there in between and everything as well. We have an episode that we released early October, episode 68. It's called Defying All Odds Against Breast Cancer with Brooke Clay Taylor. If you have not listened to that episode yet, I highly recommend that you go download and listen to it. Brooke is a rural girl who's kind of gone between her little handle is called Rural Gone Urban, and she was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer the day that she had a baby, which is so crazy. She's gone through so much, and she's currently a breast cancer thriver. It did return, but she is still currently beating the odds against stage 4 breast cancer. She's such a phenomenal person. But for every episode of the Beyond the Barn podcast that is downloaded this month, so October 1st through October 31st, Standlee is donating $1 to her foundation, the Rural Gone Urban Foundation, which helps support women who are going through breast cancer. It gives them an opportunity to make memories and build those memories with their family and just kind of lift them up and build them up and everything. And so Standlee wants to donate more money. So go download some episodes, listen to her episode. You will not regret it. It's so good. Let's see. We have some that have listened. Awesome. That's so great to hear. So be sure that you guys go and download that episode. The next episode is going to release on Tuesday, November 7th. So be sure to subscribe so you guys don't miss out on some of those topics. But have you guys joined our Facebook Lives before? I know I definitely see Reb is on there. And she's a familiar face, always joining us. And it's so good to see you.
I see a couple of familiar faces. Well,
Bonnie's
names.
been on before too. Yeah. It's so good to have you guys here with us. So for those of you who are new to our Facebook Lives, My name is Katie. I'm a co-host of Beyond the Barn podcast. I work for Standlee, and I grew up on a small cattle ranch in Central Oregon. I went to the University of Idaho to get degrees in ag business and animal science production, and traveled a little bit around doing some different agricultural things in Oregon and Idaho, and currently working for Standlee doing the podcast, these Facebook Lives, really, helping our horse owners and other livestock owners with education on how to care for their animals and give them the best lives that we can. So, Dr. Cubitt, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
I will, absolutely. So I'm originally from Australia. I moved here in 2001, went to grad school at Virginia Tech and did a master's and PhD in equine nutrition. My undergraduate degree in Australia was in animal science at the University of Queensland. Since being here, I have been fortunate enough. Virginia Tech has a large equine research facility in Middleburg, Virginia, and it is a lot of pasture based. So, forage and fiber has been a focus to all of the research that we do there. Mine focused on reproduction, growth for my master's, but reproduction for my PhD. And then I have gone on to work with a company called Performance Horse Nutrition. I co-own that with Dr. Stephen Duran, the founder of that company. And Standlee Western Premium Forage is one of our clients, and we absolutely love working with them because they have the same philosophy as us, that education is paramount, and it's not just what we're selling in a bag or a bale, but it's making sure that those products are fed to the right animals at the right times, so that we give those products the best chance of working. And obviously, you guys have so many questions and there is so much information out there, but we try to be transparent and give you the information that you need.
Right, right. Excellent. So, kind of to give you, let kind of get started, we're going to be talking about a lot today. So just take that into account and know that, Dr. Cubitt is not necessarily, she doesn't know all the details of your situation, of your horse, even asking a question. Take that into account. If you have more follow-up questions, please reach out to us, and Dr. Cubitt would be more than happy to work, one-on-one with you to address those needs for you. But we just want to make sure that you're, always like looping in and working with your veterinarian. If you have another, equine nutritionist that you work with specifically, make sure that you kind of have your team together and you're working with them before you're making any kind of drastic changes to your horse's feed program. And as you do send in your questions, remember some of these like highly detailed things like, is your horse underweight, overweight? Do they have any other ailments? How much are you feeding them? Don't just say scoops. If you can give some more exact measurements, weights, that's really helpful. Giving us details about, what you're feeding them, things like that, any kind of specifics. And then on the topic of, storing hay and making sure that you're prepared for winter, there could be some other things that you want to ask along those lines. But just make sure that when you're asking a question, you're giving us the amount of detail that Dr. Cubitt would need to be able to fully understand the picture of your scenario. So, before we get started, you guys can go ahead and please feel free to send in your questions. If we do miss it throughout the live, send it in again. I know in the past, some people have said, when you missed my question, it was a little frustrating. And I'm doing the best that I can. Sometimes we get questions coming in fairly quickly, and it's hard to make sure that I'm going exactly where I need to be to get questions. I promise it's not intentional. It's just the process of doing a live. But please, if you feel like we missed your question, send it in again. And if we miss it, at any other point, we'll work with you on it. So, to get us started, Dr. Cubitt, would you mind giving us a little bit of horse math in the sense of horse hay, helping us prep for winter and know how much hay we need to kind of plan for, whether we do get all of our hay at once or don't. Maybe you could kind of talk us through an example to kind of give us a good visual of what we're looking at.
100%. So I'll start out by saying that The fiber, the hay, the pasture, the fiber that you feed your horse is the most important part of the horse's diet. If we have the food pyramid, that forms the basis of the diet. I'm sure we can link some of the podcasts that we've done in the past into the notes about the digestive system and the importance of forage, but know that it is the most important part of the horse's diet. We give a general recommendation that a horse should eat between 1.5 to 2.5% of their body weight per day in dry fiber. So to add to Katie's list of things that you should put in your question for me is how heavy is your horse, because that can also help me with the recommendations. But so I always use 1,000-pound horse because for me it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm trying to hold the yawns in so you don't see me. But 1,000-pound horse at 1.5% of their body weight in dry fiber is 15 pounds, right? 25 pounds would be 2.5% of body weight. So I calculated, because I'm also from Australia and I hate the cold. And luckily, those of you in Virginia know we are getting some really nice weather for the rest of this week. It's going to be 84 on Saturday, but then next week it's
Whoa.
going to be 27 as a low on Tuesday. So that's going to be a big gut
Shocker.
punch. Yes, yeah. It would break us back to reality. So I actually calculated that for most people that actually have a winter, there's probably about 5 months out of the year that or about 150 days, that we're in those cold months where the horse is 100% reliant on hay. Now, some horses, they might be, maybe you're not in a cold climate, but you're Texas or Florida and there's just no pasture, or California, there's no pasture available, so you can take that to 365 days. But we were talking originally about winter and how much you would need to store for a winter. So I worked it out as 5 months, 150 days. If you have a horse that is eating the minimum, so 1.5% of their body weight as a 1,000-pound horse, and don't worry, I think we're going to share this math. Can you even put it up on the screen, Katie?
Yep, I'll
Um,
go ahead and share it right now while you're talking.
but that would be 15 pounds of forage a day. And if we times that by 150 days, we're looking at a hair over a ton, so 1.13 tons for that 5 month period. But let's just say our horse, we would like to give them more hay, and we're on he's a harder keeper or he's doing more exercise, and we're doing that 2.5% of body weight, so 25 pounds of forage per day, dry fiber per day over 150 days works out to be closer to 2 tons, so 1.88 tons, or close to 2 tons of hay that you need over that winter period. Um, and it's great if you have the facility to store that much hay and you can buy it from a grower at a great discount because you're buying such a large quantity. But we do know that there are some limitations. I mean, we do live in the real world and hay is expensive. Good quality hay is expensive. So sometimes the thought of buying 2 tons of hay and having it sit in my loft um, is just a bit overwhelming, the price that would be. So don't be afraid of using other alternatives. Hay in a it's not really even just hay in a bag, but there are forage products in a bag, alfalfa cubes, timothy pellets. There's a variety of different forage alternatives that can be easily accessible. I know the Standlee Premium Western Forage products are available at many different distributors across the country. And so that makes it really convenient to be able to just pop down to the store on the weekend or whatever day you want to shop, pick up a few bags. You don't have a lot of money invested then, and maybe if you didn't have the storage. But do know that, skimping on the forage will cost you in the long run. It is the one thing that you should never shortchange your horse on.
Excellent. And I did link this in the comments. So if you guys want to take some time after this and look a little bit more into this example, we have this on our blog post on the website. So you're more than welcome to check that out. And out of curiosity, I know we have some questions come in, which is great, and I'll start working through those in just a minute. But out of curiosity, how many of you you like to get as much hay up front as you can, Or maybe you're kind of, I just get, hay as I go. Or are you kind of in between where you get a significant amount of hay, but then you know that at some point you're going to be restocking up and things like that? So let us know in the comments, just so we kind of know like who we're talking with and kind of what your situation is, because that could also help us a little bit as we're working through this.
And I'll go first, and I can answer that question from my perspective here in Virginia. I have cattle that I feed through the wintertime. I have lots of pasture that they eat during the summer and spring months. Um, but I buy my hay. I try to buy it all up front because they run out of hay. So I have invested in lots of different storage options to not lose that hay. So
Right.
um,
It's a big investment especially
it
if you
is a
buy up front. And so you
even
want to make
cow
sure
hay,
that
it's a
you're,
big investment.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Well, and if you're thinking about it too, with any kind of livestock, unless you have other crazy things going on, if you have a very normal animal, your largest investment for that animal
Mm.
is going to be their feed.
And
That's
I
just the
feel
name of
like
the
it's
game.
supply and demand, at least I
Yeah.
have found anyway. If I like I look out there and I'm like, gosh, there's so much grass. Why do I even need to think about hay? But that's in, June.
Yeah.
That's when I need to be buying the hay because there's lots of hay available because my cow hay, there's lots of
Right.
beautiful fields
Right.
in Virginia. But if I get to December or January and I've run out of hay and that's when everybody wants it, oh, the price, you bet the price has gone up. Supply and demand. So,
Right, right. And that's, yeah, it's just kind of how it's going. But we have actually some variety of people on the live tonight.
yeah.
Many of them, it sounds like a lot, try to get as much up front as they can um, at once, stock up. Some come and buy Standlee, which we're so glad that we can be a supplier for you and available for you. So we're really glad to hear that. And some people every few weeks will go and get some. So excellent. We have quite a variety here, which is really great to see. Um, okay, again, send in your questions. I'm going to start trying to work through some of these right now. And let's see. Okay, let's do. Georgie says, how much more hay should horses eat in the winter? This is a great question. Living
Yep.
outdoors in the Midwest, it's
Oh,
cold.
and we have a whole podcast on this,
Yes, we'll
on
have to link
feeding.
that.
You'll have to link that. Yes,
I'll find it right
absolutely.
now.
Because I probably can't remember all of the specifics that we went through on that one, but definitely there is kind of a thermoneutral zone where the hay and grain that you can feed your horse that just maintains their body weight is enough. But then when you get below that temperature, um, then we start to increase their caloric requirement. Sometimes it's just adding more hay, and sometimes you get to a point where it's so cold and they need so many more calories that you do actually have to start adding in some more concentrated energy source like a grain. But the other benefit to hay is if you listen to one of our digestive system podcasts, you'll know that in the hindgut, so from the cecum, the large colon, and the small colon, it's full of microbes. And when they ferment that fiber, a byproduct is that they create heat. So I always say the simplest thing to feed your horse in the wintertime is hay because it'll keep them warm. But even sometimes a little stemmier hay you can throw in there in the wintertime to keep them warm. But definitely in the wintertime, depending on how cold it is, whether it's windy and rainy or windy and icy or just cold, all of those things factor in, then the hay is the first thing that I increase. If somebody says, oh, do I need to increase the amount of grain my horse is feeding? First, I increase the amount of hay.
And I am going to share this really quick because this is what you were referencing, Dr. Cubitt. This it that episode, by
Ah,
the way, if
perfect.
if
Because
you guys have not
Georgie
listened to
asked
it yet,
percentage. Yeah. And I'm like,
it
oh, I can't remember percentage.
right, the numbers. So
Yes.
yeah, if you want to just briefly touch on it real quick, and
Yeah. So that
will look at it
what
more,
was
but
the
yeah,
oh
it's
and
great.
scroll up a little bit because that critical temperature is different for adult horses versus senior horses versus young horses. So if we say that it was for the lower critical temperature for a horse with a thin coat, for example, is 41 degrees. And now if you scroll down, we'll be able to see those numbers. And so anything if we go 10 degrees below 41, so if we're at 31, then we increase the caloric requirement by 2 megacals. Good quality hay runs around 1 megacal per pound, so you'd increase by about 2 pounds of hay. If you've got lesser quality hay that may run around 0.75, then maybe you're looking at adding 3.5 pounds. But the more you get below that lower critical temperature. And remember, for a foal or a senior horse, that lower critical temperature is maybe not 41, maybe it's 51. I can't remember. It's then you it certainly increase that feed intake. It's less of a percentage and more just based on caloric requirement. When we have wind and rain, then that also significantly increases their caloric requirement.
Yeah,
And you think why rain versus like something like snow? And we all know some snow can be pretty dry, so it actually doesn't seep in to their hair coat and make them wet versus
right.
rain, it flattens down that hair coat, it gets in right down to their skin level. And so rain and wind can actually be a lot worse. Even though the temperature is a little higher, it can be worse than snow and wind.
Right. Well, and it's just like when you see, and many people probably on the live tonight probably understand this, but people see, horses or cattle or whatever out there with snow-covered backs. They're just like insulating themselves like that.
Yeah.
If there's snow there, that's a good thing. When you don't see snow but it's snowing, then you know that it's,
They're
a
all
little
wet.
bit more,
Yeah.
they need to be
Yeah.
able to eat more to stay warm or whatever. So, excellent. Yeah, that's a great one. If you guys have a chance, you can go check out that blog post and go listen to that episode. It's actually one of our most popular episodes. Tons of great content in there. And feel free to share it with your friends too if you know that they'd be really interested in that. Let's see. Pamela says storage of hay in Central Florida. Difficult due to humidity. I have it in my tack/feed room. Any great suggestions to keeping it safe?
It's really hard, and the main thing is to keep it away from the walls so that you can increase air circulation. Make sure you keep it up off the floor, and if possible, to have a fan in there to help keep circulating the air. But yeah, I know it can be very difficult in Florida.
Yes. Okay, Kylie says, is it best to provide the hay at all times or just once or twice a day?
Again, we would go back to what is the horse designed to do? He's a grazing animal. His digestive system is built to be continually consuming small bites of food all throughout the day. They literally would graze 17, 18 hours out of a 24-hour period. So I would say, if possible, it's best if you can keep hay in front of your horses all the time. Ad lib.
Excellent. Okay. Rub says, I store hay on dirt covered with 6 mil tarp and pallets. I still have mold under bottom bales. Horses get coughs eating it. Any suggestions to stop the mold? I store 500 bales stacked 8 layers tall.
First thing, never, 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 never feed moldy hay to horses. Unlike cows, where you can get away with it, horses, you know, it's okay until it's not. They'll die. So we don't want to feed moldy hay ever. If they're coughing, take it away. I wouldn't wet it. I wouldn't do anything. Maybe the the dirt area is obviously exuding moisture. I don't know whether there's some kind of treatment you can put on the soil that really dries it out, like some kind of desiccant, maybe a lime or something before you put your top down, and then maybe 2 layers of pallets, again, just to increase that air circulation. Um, or you just know that bottom layer is going to be a waste, and you buy sounds terrible, but you could buy some really crummy hay and use it as your sacrifice hay that's going to go on the bottom if you weren't able to kind of lift it up and do all these things that might stop that happening.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully I'm saying your name right. Katrin. Being in Washington, it is challenging to keep the hay dry and free of mold spores over the winter. I have sprayed it with vinegar to kill any outer film that was forming.
Yeah, again, mold is very difficult because in horses, it's just so dangerous, and so chance if you see it or smell it, I mean, there is way too much to feed your horses, and it's all about however in your facility you can keep that air flowing. Because if air is moving, it's helping to keep it dry. Um, so that it's hard without being right there and kind of
Right. And
helping to
seeing the
engineering
situation and set up.
your
Yeah.
solution
Um,
scenario. But one thing we know, keep it off the ground, keep it away from the walls, make sure that you can get air circulation around it.
right. And if for some reason you can't put it in a building, making sure that you have it very well tarped. Um,
Yeah, it almost sounds like sometimes if the hay is being stored indoors and that is really forming this very humid little box, then
yeah.
maybe storing it. I know Washington, it rains all the time, so this probably is not for your situation, but maybe in Florida, if you had it outside then and it was really well topped, then the outside is also helping you with that airflow. But
Right. And just, I mean, also knowing that just because something works for someone, especially in one particular part of the country, it doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else. So if you're storing it in a certain way and it's not, it doesn't seem to be working in the way that you're
try
wanting
something
it
else.
to,
Yeah.
maybe switch it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Try another method just to see if, I mean, that's a good point too. You know, you would think a building would be the best place, but depending on the climate there and
Hmm.
environment, maybe it would be better to try something different. See if it's better, right? That's
Hmm.
what we're
Yeah.
looking for. It's not always going to be perfect because that's just what it is when it comes to owning livestock. But what can we do to make it better, right?
Yeah,
So
and I think don't be afraid to reach out to your local extension office
yeah,
because your local extension office is really well versed in your environmental conditions and the types of hay and facilities and availability of storage options. So they can sometimes be a great resource.
right, right. Okay. Okay. This Todd wants to know, can we feed your horse straight alfalfa cubes, no stem hay? Do you have to soak it?
Okay, so the scientific answer is no, you don't have to soak it. But the real world answer is you don't have to soak it if your horse isn't going to eat it too quickly. He's got great teeth. He's not the bottom of the pecking order. The list is endless. So I am a proponent of soaking all forages that come in pelleted or cubed form, and even pelleted feeds. There is no harm in getting extra moisture into the digestive system. So yes, absolutely. You can feed straight alfalfa cubes to your horse that aren't soaked if your horse is used to them and doesn't eat them quickly, but especially if it's something new that you're introducing, always soak them. And
Excellent.
it's mainly because I have a tendency to eat them too quickly. It's not the cube's fault, it's the way the horse will chew them.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Amber
this is a big
says
one.
it's a big one. I
Good.
have to get all my hay up front as I have special tough hay. I have a shelter logic enclosed with some gaps for ventilation. I have a mare who is EMS. She is fed hay throughout the day, 5 pounds of hay in the morning, 5 pounds for lunch with 1 pound of Standlee beet pulp shreds, 1 pound of tough grass, 10 pounds of hay at night with 1 pound of tough grass. I'm in Idaho and we get really cold. What are your thoughts on the feed my EMS mare is getting?
This particular program, now the one thing that we left out, if she's a 2,000-pound horse, she's not getting enough food. If she's a mini, she's getting way too much. So you can kind of get my gist as to why. I'm going to assume she's 1,000, 1,100 pounds. And based on that, the amount you're feeding and the schedule you're feeding on sounds perfect. The one thing she's missing is vitamins and minerals. Now we're talking about hay, so maybe you just didn't mention that, but she should certainly at least get a ration balancer or some kind of vitamin and mineral and some plain white salt. But as far as the forage, it just based on those numbers and my assumption of her body weight, looks great.
Excellent. And I should, being the producer and co-host of the Beyond the Barn podcast, I should probably plug our latest episode, Dr. Cubitt, that we talked about feeding vitamins and minerals and like the function of them and how they're
Oh,
absorbed in the
yes. I'm like, what are
body.
you talking about?
Um,
Yes.
Great episode. We just released that
That was our
yesterday.
first video one, wasn't it? Or is that not
Yes,
that one
we
yet? Yes.
did. Yeah, just so we could be able to share some of your video clips on our social media so you guys can see us live in the flesh and like we're real people.
Yeah, because usually I do the podcast like a bum with my gym clothes on because nobody's going to see me. And then she says, now we have to do video. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to actually comb my hair.
Comb your hair.
I only got to get dressed from the, top half. I can still wear my gym pants on the
Oh,
bottom.
yeah. Okay. Laura says, I would like for my horse to have access to hay all day and night, but she eats it up in just a few hours. She wears shoes, so I'm afraid to use hay nuts. Any affordable ideas to stretch her hay out?
Oh, yes. And there's all kinds of really expensive things. There's a porta grazer option. That's the brand name. You can Google it. If you're savvy and Pinteresty at all, you can go on Pinterest and look up kind of slow feed options. But uh, yeah, I mean, there's also, again, I have no affiliation to this company whatsoever, but there's a company called Hay Chicks, and they, a group of ladies that have this hay net company. And their Facebook is actually really cool because just regular people that buy their hay nets have all these different solutions and how they've used the hay nets. One that I think is great, it's a big kind of Rubbermaid water trough thing, and they
I
use
just
the hay
saw
net.
exactly
Yes,
what you're
yes, you
talking
know.
about. Yep.
They use the hay net and they put the hay in it and they dump it into the trough. So that serves multiple purposes, right? You're not wasting any hay.
Right.
Typically, a horse isn't putting its leg up and into there.
They'd
They're
really
also,
have to work hard to get it's just it'd just be
yeah,
like the similar tank that you could use for like a small water tank.
yeah,
And so that would really help if your horse
uh-huh,
has shoes. You could
yeah,
still use a hay net. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah. That was great. I was gonna say something, but you started saying it and I was like,
yeah.
yep, that was great. Okay, let's see. Okay. Are round bales okay? I've been told, quote unquote, bad for him, a senior PPID. Is that true?
Here's what I'll tell you about hay that's made by local producers. It's as good as the grass and the manufacturing that went into it. A round bale can be terrible and a round bale can be great. A square bale can be terrible and a square bale can be great. Round bales typically have this kind of stereotypical kind of, I don't know what the actual word I'm looking for, but this myth around them that it's kind of true. There's a lot of people, especially out here in Virginia, that literally there's a field that went to seed and they wanted to get the grass off. So instead of just mowing the field and letting the grass fall on the ground, they round baled it up and chucked it on the side of the field and, called it hay. And so if the round bale is coming from a reputable source, get a hay test on it. So you put a probe in it and you get a hay test on it. And for a horse, a senior horse with PPID, we're looking for it to have low sugars and starches. That's Cushing's disease for those that are unfamiliar with that acronym. And as for a senior horse, we also want to make sure that the digestibility is high. So those digestibility numbers would actually be low, indicating that it's highly digestible. Um, so the answer to that can be yes and it can be no. It all depends on the bales you're
The
buying.
quality, yep,
The
yep.
quality,
Getting that
yeah.
hay test, if
Mhm.
yeah, if it's a product that doesn't have any kind of guaranteed analysis or anything on it, getting that hay test will help you
It's your
better
only
see
way of
what you have.
testing. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, this is a comment. It's again, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, Katrin, the one from Washington. She was talking about I've noticed that the tarp seems to draw moisture, so I no longer use it except for on top of the hay. Again, I think this is also another really great example of, depending on your location and where you are, how
Hmm.
much humidity you have,
Yeah.
any of those environmental factors. So, being able to be resourceful and see what works for you and what doesn't. Some places you can tarp, and it sounds like in her area where she's at, it hasn't been really great for her. But I wanted to bring up that comment because that's what we're here for, right? Is talking through some of these ideas and things, and knowing what works for some people and what doesn't work for others. Kay has a comment from Montana, and you talked about this, Dr. Cubitt, with the pallets, but she puts her hay on pallets. She's in Montana. And when she didn't have a building, she tarped it, and it did well in Montana.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
another good comment. I think it's always
Absolutely.
fantastic to hear other people, what they're doing, what works for them and what doesn't, just to kind of brainstorm, right?
Yep.
More heads is always better than one.
And so the actually, Katie and I were discussing this earlier. I was frantically trying to find this research because I knew it
Yeah.
was out there and I'd read it. But University of Tennessee, now this was looking at round bales, but I think we can extrapolate to square bales, any kind of hay. But it showed a 5% loss in actual dry matter when the bales were stored in a hay barn, right? And so it was enclosed, there's ventilation, air circulation, but the moisture isn't getting to those. If it was stacked or topped hay on pallets, there was a 14% loss in dry matter. Just the plain old net wrapped round bales with no top, not on pallets, 23% loss. So nearly a quarter of the actual hay that you bought was lost and wasted. And uncovered hay, so no top on it, no nothing, no net wrap, 30% loss. So, um, you know, doing something is better than nothing. And the more we can keep it out of the weather, the better. But definitely
It's
keeping it up on pallets and topping the top of it um, is what most people are going to do if they have large quantities outside.
right.
And I think that 14% loss is okay.
Yep. And if I haven't got to your question, remember, please put your questions in case I missed it, just to make sure that we're getting to as many as we can on tonight's live. Jesus says, what signs should I look for that my horse isn't getting the proper vitamin intake?
Ooh, I just went really close to the screen. Oh, that's kind of a hard one, Jesus, because um, most of the time our horses, if they're just getting slightly malnourished, slightly less vitamin C or copper or zinc than they need, you're not going to notice huge outward signs. Maybe when it comes to zinc and copper, you might not have a great hair coat, you might not have great hoof quality. Selenium, vitamin E, you might have poor immune function. So in the wintertime, they seem to be more susceptible getting respiratory issues than the other horses, or vitamin E. Maybe they're not recovering and they seem to be a little more muscle sore. So it's hard to say. I will say blood tests and hair tests for vitamin kind of status in a horse are not accurate.
Right. And if you want to know more,
We
why,
just did a
listen
podcast.
to the episode 69, consequences of ignoring your vitamins and minerals for horses,
Yeah.
because Dr. Cubitt answers that question very well as to why you would not want to rely on that. So, okay. Amanda says, I have a 7-year-old mare. She is a short and stout built horse. She had mild laminitis last year and has since been managed, but I do my best to stay on top of her care and nutrition. She is very picky about hay. We have Timothy Orchard grass mix hay. She will refuse first cut hay, but will eat second and third cut. Is there any risk in association with laminitis to feeding the later cuts of hay?
Um, well, here's what I'll say. First cut hay is if you had a wet spring and it takes a little longer for us to get into the field to cut that first crop. it will have more non-digestible fiber content. And as that non-digestible fiber content increases, that palatability goes down. So that's why she does it. Some horses like it, some horses don't. And not all first cut hay is consistently the same, right? So as far as second and third cut hay, digestibility is typically higher, palatability is higher. So the actual calories and nutrition that you will get out of that hay is higher. To say that first cut hay has more or less sugars and starches than second or third cut, I can't answer that. You need to get it tested. That's the only way that you're going to determine sugar and starch content, because it's less about the maturity of the plant and more about the environmental conditions that that particular life cycle went through. Um, so that's what I would
It's
say.
so dependent on who's
Yeah.
growing it
Hmm.
because everybody does things a little bit differently, especially if you live in different areas of the
Hmm.
country. I know Standlee, we have a very consistent way of and scientific way and method of how the hay is grown, when it's cut, all these like determining factors to be very specific and making sure that the hay that we get is exactly what we want it to be for those of you that are buying our products. And
Hmm.
so if somebody doesn't cut it at the right time, or let's say you're in a different area of the country that gets a lot of rain, well, you want to cut it but you can't quite cut it because it's raining and you're trying to get that in between
Hmm.
to get it dried out so you can get it
Yeah.
baled. It's yeah, testing is
Idaho
really
has the luxury of perfect weather conditions as well. You get to control all the weather.
yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, this is a good question. Caitlin says, has there been any research done on sun bleached hay and if it loses nutritional value?
Yes, absolutely. So what we know is it's losing vitamin A and vitamin E. But we also know that if you crack open the hay bale, it's usually just that outer inch or so of the bale. And that's why when we do a hay test, a proper hay test, we use a hay corer and core all the way into the bale to get a more accurate reflection of the whole bale. But 100% sun bleached hay, it's not necessarily losing protein or calories, but it is losing vitamin A and vitamin E.
Right. And you said in the last episode that we did too about how it's very readily available in fresh green pasture grass, but once it's cut, it starts going down.
Even
The
the best
better,
quality hay, the
right,
vitamin A and the vitamin E
right.
decrease
That's just
rapidly.
what happens
Yes,
once it's cut. Yeah,
more rapidly in sun bleached hay,
right.
but we actually did some research on Standlee alfalfa, and because we were looking at the harvesting and then storage, and I was like, wow, they harvest because it's so dry. It doesn't have to sit and lay out in the field for very long. They don't have to ted it over and over and over again. Literally, with the alfalfa, they spray some water on it before harvesting it so that it doesn't all smash.
Right.
And then so that it dries really quickly, it hasn't been exposed to the sun very long, and then it's baled and pretty much immediately taken off those fields and put into these light proof top structures. And that hay had a much higher vitamin A and vitamin E content
Okay.
than typical hay that's not treated that way. So it's really about how quickly you can get the light off it.
Right. And Kylie says, what Stanley hay works best in a hay net? For compressed, should I still wait for it to expand before putting it in a hay net?
No, you don't have to wait for it to expand before you put in a hay net. If you're, especially if you're trying to slow the horse down, the more compressed it is, the harder it is for them to chew it. And exactly, this is the exact reason why we say feed by weight, not by volume.
Right.
I remember I did years ago, I went with Dusty Standlee and we went to Nashville and we did a TV show on RFD TV, and we bought a compressed bale into the studio. And I was kind of, it's heavy, and I was dragging it.
It doesn't look like it'd be
It
that heavy
does use
because
this
it's
tiny
like,
little mini
yeah,
bale, and this man comes over, and Dusty's just standing back, just kind of laughing at what's about to go down because this man's like, "Oh yeah, I'll get it, I'll get it," and then he's like, "Oh, that's really heavy," and I was like, "Yeah, compressed bale." So exactly why we weigh the hay. So
Right,
and
right,
so 5 pounds, whether it's fluffed up or it's compressed, it doesn't really matter. It's five
right.
pounds.
And it does make it a little bit easier to break it apart. Like, let's say if you're wanting to feed that evening, and you know that you're going to open up a new bale, if you cut it open in the morning, it will make it easier to pull apart a little bit because it is compressed.
Hmm.
And again, yes, weighing it because if you were to weigh, like, let's say you pulled off a flake. I mean, every flakes are different in each bale too, right? Not just ours, but not like any kind of local produced hay or anything like that. Depending on how the baler is baling the hay bales, and how tight they are and everything. If you pull off a flake is not necessarily equal to another flake, even within that. It might be within that bale, but not bale to bale. So just keep that in mind, and then you can put them in the hay nets and make it a little bit easier for you if you're trying to get your horses to slow down on their eating. So, okay, let's see. I'm going to try to fit in one more question, and then we're kind of getting close to our end time here. Let's see. Okay. What are your guidelines for soaking hay to reduce sugar content? I have read 1 to 2 hours with hot water and an hour with cold. Does it need to be rinsed or is draining enough?
That's actually half an hour, Katie.
Oh, half hour. Sorry,
It's like,
half
oh my
hour.
God, 2 hours.
One
And
to
you've got
two
to keep
hours. I
adding
guess it
hot
would have been
water.
1 to 2 hours if there was a dash in there. You know, it's only
Yes.
Wednesday. Sorry,
So
guys.
that is kind of the broad recommendation on some research that was done. Half an hour in hot water to an hour in cold water. What happened though after that research came out is another group did some research on a variety of different hays. I think there were 15 different hays, and they did up to 15 hours of soaking, and some hays didn't lose any sugars and starches, and some miraculously got more sugars and starches. So, what I would say is if you are soaking hay for a horse that needs, has a metabolic issue, know what you're starting with. If you're starting with a hay that's got 20% sugars and starches, I do not believe, it's my professional opinion, you are not going to soak enough sugar and starch out of it with 15 hours of hot water to feed it to your horse. So I always like to know what I'm starting with. And then sometimes I'll even do different soaks, like maybe I'll soak it for half an hour in hot water or an hour in cold water. And then what you do is you take it out. You shouldn't really need to rinse it, but you absolutely need to drain the water. And then you can freeze it, and then that stops the metabolic process, and you can then submit that sample to Equi-Analytical to test it. But
Excellent. Okay. I know there's a few questions that we didn't get to, and I apologize. If you are not yet a part of our Facebook group, The Life We Live, Ride, and Love, please join. We'll throw this in the comments so you can click on the direct link for it. Come in there and we can try to get your question answered for you. It's a really great resource. So jump in there. Another thing, as we're kind of wrapping this up, our other Facebook Lives, along with this one, will be posted to our YouTube page. So feel free to go check that out if you want to go back and listen to it again and review it, or if you want to send it to your friends, or if you missed one, you can go check it out there. Another quick reminder, download episode 68 with Brooke Taylor. Help us donate more money to the Royal Gone Urban Foundation to support breast cancer patients and their families. And what else do we have here? Oh, if you guys want another chance to win some free product coupons, go ahead and fill out our survey at the end. If you have not found that yet, we'll go ahead and put that in the comments below as well, so you can click on that. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. So that way we can kind of look at these things, how we're doing them. Do we need to make changes to make it better for you? We really want to be able to have your guys' feedback on that. And what you guys have all been waiting for. Okay. Our winner for sharing the Facebook Live, thank you so much. Our winner for sharing the Facebook Live is Unbridled Wild. Thank you for joining us and sharing the Facebook Live. Reach out to me at podcast@standlee.com to get your free product coupons so we can connect. And our winner for joining us this evening and hanging out with us is Reb. Let's see. What was your last name, Reb? I know you were on here. Where were you at? Reb Reed. Okay, so connect with us, podcast@standlee.com. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you and really enjoy having you guys be with us to learn more about horse nutrition. So thank you all for joining us this evening. We'll talk to you later, Dr. Cubitt.
Thank you, Katie.